once we got to China, first thing I was seeing was my mother getting raped, and they sold us into sex slaves. Because of the one-child policy, there are more than 33 million men in China cannot find wives. So they buy North Korean girls like livestock and buy them as sex toys. She was sold for $65. I was sold for over $200. And 2 years of slavery in China, I met missionaries from South Korea who were rescuing North Koreans. And they told us there was a way out of China, which means that we had to walk across the frozen Gobi Desert into Mongolia by foot.
Battle Line Podcast, you guys see the title. We have one of our biggest guests to date ever on Battle Line Podcast, Yeonmi Park, for basically an entire hour sit down about the new book. You guys know her very well from the first book, if you saw her on Rogan and all that. But the newest book is While Time Remains, a North Korean defector's search for freedom in America. We talk about the rise of creeping communism and socialism in the U.S., as well as her escaping a dictatorship of North Korea, fleeing to China, and then eventually fleeing to America. Really eye-opening stuff that you guys are going to want to hear. Before we get into it, Ned CBD, the absolute best. None of this crap imported from China, straight from Colorado. But if you've only tried their CBD and you haven't yet tried their sleep blend, you really have to. Now, 70 million Americans have chronic sleep issues, and 50% of Americans deal with sleep deprivation. You've probably dealt with this at some point in your life, and I know how difficult that could be. One of our favorite brands, Ned, is here to help you with their incredible new product, Shut-Eye Chai. It's inspired by 5,000 years of ancient healing tradition, and this is Ned's biggest product launch to date. It's a mellow super blend latte for sleep. It tastes incredible. I love this stuff, and as much as I use the CBD for sleep, this is a product made specifically for sleep. CBD has so many uses in terms of, if you're having fatigue issues, if you're having joint pain, or really any pain, it's been tremendous for that, or post-traumatic stress. But this is a different product, and this actually doesn't contain any CBD, and it's made from mushrooms and different botanicals. Really incredible stuff. Fungi, herbs, plants, minerals, roots, spices, and Ned products have helped me perform at my most optimal, doing great interviews like this one that you're going to hear with Yeonmi Park. So discover how Shut-Eye Chai can revolutionize your sleep and get 15% off with the code BATTLELINE. That's helloned.com/BattleLine, or enter BattleLine at checkout. You really got to check this out and learn more about it from the site. I also have the Shut-Eye Chai book that they gave, the little Goodnight Moon with the founders of Ned. Love those guys. We're going to have Rhett back on the show soon, too, from Ned. So once again, helloned.com/BattleLine, HELLONED.com/BattleLine. Sweet dreams. Now let's get over to the interview.
From Omaha, Nebraska to New York City, from planet Earth to extraterrestrial life in space, a podcast with no equal, engaged in unconventional warfare through your speakers and headphones. This is a show about embracing the suck, conquering your demons, and finding God in the face of adversity. Chris Tonto Peranto.
Switch is on, motherfucker, I'm gonna shoot you in the face.
Ian Scotto.
Ian and I have been dating for a long time.
You are now tuned into the Battle Line Podcast.
The Switch is on, Battle Line Podcast, very honored to be joined by a very special guest. I genuinely would say one of the biggest guests we've had on the show. Yeonmi Park, author of While Time Remains, a North Korean defector's search for freedom in America, out now through Simon & Schuster. I mean, a lot of people really know your first book, which is In Order to Live, a North Korean Girl's Journey to Freedom. There's that crossover with Joe Rogan and all the other great podcasts you've been on. And yeah, it's an honor to have you on.
Oh, thank you. So nice to meet you.
Absolutely. So I want to get into, of course, what you're working on in the new book and all the great work that you've done, the TED Talks, all the charity work you do with Linked, for example, with Link, Liberty in North Korea, a nonprofit organization focused on rescuing North Korean refugees hiding in China and bringing them to South Korea, America as well. But for people who don't know your story, I mean, there's plenty of people who listened to the Rogan interview and all your other appearances, but if you'd like to get into your journey of just growing up in North Korea and fleeing to China and eventually America, I think people would love to hear it because it's remarkable.
Yeah, so I was born in North Korea, in the northern part of the country. And luckily, by the time I was 13 years old, I was living in the border town. So at nighttime, I was able to see the lights coming from China. And by this time, North Korea was systemically starved by the regime. The regime decided that if they don't feed us, it's easier to control the people. Because, if we don't eat, we are not going to think about, the meaning of life or freedom. Only thing we are going to be busy dealing with everyday surviving, finding the next meal. So that's why the regime chose to starve us. And then, of course, when I was growing up in North Korea, I did not know what internet was. I never even seen a map of the world. I did not even know that I was oppressed. The first thing my mother told me as a young girl was not to even whisper because the birds and mice could hear me. And by 13, we couldn't find any more food. So we decided to risk our lives for a bowl of rice. My sister escaped to China at 16. And then a few days later, when I was 13 years old, I crossed the same frozen river into China to search for her and finding food. Once we got to China, first thing I was seeing was my mother getting raped, and they sold us into sex slaves. Because of the one-child policy, there are more than 33 million men in China cannot find wives. So they buy North Korean girls like livestock and buy them as sex toys. She was sold for $65. I was sold for over $200. And 2 years of slavery in China, I met missionaries from South Korea who were rescuing North Koreans. And they told us there was a way out of China, which means that we had to walk across the frozen Gobi Desert into Mongolia by foot. So I did that when I was 15 years old, survived the desert, and got to South Korea in 2009, and that was my escape story.
Yeah, which is incredible. I mean, because from an American perspective, we do hear about the total difference in culture in South Korea and North Korea. And we've had people on the podcast who have been stationed at the DMZ and all that. And it sounds like for you, what we know, it's like a total media blackout. You don't even know that there's another world out there.
Yeah, it's like literally a black hole of information. Nothing gets in, and the information control works both ways. It works how the regime conceals themselves from the outside world. As a journalist, nobody can go to North Korea and then start filming and start writing about it because people cannot go to North Korea. If they go, it's completely controlled by the state sanctioned they tour with a tour guide. So they never get to see the reality of North Korea. And the North Korean people don't even have the passport. They are not even free to move around between the countries. So completely is an isolated country from everybody.
Yeah, I mean, the closest thing to someone going over, and I don't know if you've seen the documentary, but it's a complete propaganda tour, was when Dennis Rodman went over and they had that big bang in Pyongyang. And did you see that documentary by any chance?
I did not see the Dennis Rodman documentary, but I saw his interviews with the CNN while he was drunk in Pyongyang. And This
Yeah,
these
and I
things,
mean,
yeah,
singing "Happy Birthday" to Kim
yeah.
Jong Un, and "Dear Leader" and all that, and also if you watch the documentary, the basketball players from North Korea, they're all repeating the same line of what seems like propaganda of being there. There was one person on the team who said something a little differently than the rest of them, but it seems like everything is in line of just, this is how you're going to interact with the press, this is the script you're going to give, and that's all.
Yeah, it's everything is trained beforehand. And North Korean people, for them, seeing the dear leader is a lifetime honor. It's a comparing to a person who met a god in North Korea. It's a in Korean word like 영접자 is like where you seen the son of this universe. And so those people who are even get to see Kim Jong-un, the basketball players, they are the elite of the elite in North Korea. And
Sure.
even then, they have no freedom to say what they want.
So when did you actually come to America, and when did you learn about America and just the complete polar opposite in terms of, and you get into this in your new book, but freedom and liberty and all of these ideals that we are at least supposed to have over here, as opposed to where you were, which is under a complete tyranny, dictatorship?
So I heard about America, of course, in North Korean classrooms, even in my math problems were like this. There are 4 American bastards, we killed 2 of them. Then how many American bastards left to kill? And they showed us these posters of Americans, the drawings, because we don't have internet. They're not gonna show the Brad Pitt to us, right? They really draw this monstrous looking, like this cold-blooded reptiles, taking teeth out of our women, torturing our children, like, burning our people, that kind of very scary posters of Americans. So all our lives, we believed that Americans were our sworn enemies. We had to fight till death with them because they were trying to attack us. So by the time I went to South Korea, that's when they were started telling us that Americans are not monsters. They're human beings just like us, and they have warm blood. That was very shocking just to hear that they have warm blood. And then like they live in a democracy. So I came to America in 2013 for the first time to do a Bible study in Tyler, Texas. And I remember getting off from that flight from Seoul, Incheon to Houston. I had a layoff, and I was very afraid, like, is this people gonna eat me? What these kind of people do, right? And when I got to Houston, and there was like men in their hoodies, holding their children's hands, eating chips, and just Americans are so chill and they're smiling, right? And that's when I realized, like, lie doesn't have power. We don't have to fear this propaganda and lies, because when I just saw the Americans for the first time in my life, that all the brainwash just went away.
Yeah, I mean, that's absolutely incredible. So when you say that you were on there with missionaries, did you, because I know you've spoken about this before, how in North Korea, like, the religion is the state. The God, as you said, is Kim Jong-un. So were you converted to Christianity in South Korea?
So I was rescued by Christians for, like, initially, right, in China. The Christians from South Korea came, and their mission was saving us spiritually and also physically. They made sure that we heard about God and Jesus Christ, and for the price us becoming believers, they were going to rescue us. And they did rescue us from China to Mongolia. At the time, actually, when I was living as a sex slave and, as a fugitive in China, I became a believer, but I don't think that was even a real thing, because I was so desperate to survive. If somebody just brought a rock to me and asked me to believe, and that's how you're going to survive, I would have believed it, right?
Sure.
So, and then, like what you said, right, these Christians, some of them were very judgmental. They said, what I have done to survive in China, which was being raped by these traffickers, were very shameful. And I was a child, and couldn't believe that I was being judged for what I had to do to survive. And it was not even my fault that I wanted to be born in North Korea. And then I came to America many years later, and I became a mother 5 years ago. And that's when I just becoming a believer But initially I had this like atheist period where like I was so upset at any kind of belief or any kind of dogma, you know. And
Yeah.
especially North Korea copied the Bible exactly. They copied the Bible and said that God which was Kim Il Sung, loved us so much. He gave us his son, was Kim Jong Il. His body dies, but his spirit is with us all the time. He knows what we're thinking, how much hair on our head, and like 10 commandments was translated there. 10 commandments. It was a completely same Bible they're copying. So that really made me to initially get like really despising it. You know, it felt like it was the same thing.
So I want to fast forward to you come to America, you write this book, and this book becomes massively popular, honestly, because of the fact that so few people have done what you've done and then came forward and said, I'm going to write about this. I'm sure the few that do live in America that did flee North Korea, they don't get the opportunity to write a book as you did. And some of them would probably rather leave this in the past and never speak about it again and blend in with the culture. So how did this all come about? How did the idea come about to say, I want to put this story out there. I want Americans to know what really goes on in North Korea. And how do you get approached by Simon & Schuster, which leads to interviews with some of the top journalists and podcasters like Joe Rogan out there? I mean, it's an amazing success story based on a very tragic story.
Yeah, exactly what you said. There's only 209 nursing defectors in America currently.
Wow.
Only just above 200 made in the last 80 years.
That's
the
incredible.
mathematical chances of me ending up here is very rare. And I think when you survive something like that, and you do have a lot of survivor's guilt, you know, because you know truly that you're not the only one who fought hard to survive. Which I just got lucky along the journey. I got rescued by missionaries, like I said. And initially, I gave a speech in Dublin, and it was nothing special. It was like 36 other speakers there. They gave me like 5 minute spot to give a speech. And at the time, I really thought, if I let the world know what's happening under Chinese Communist Party, how they are sponsoring the dictatorship in North Korea, and how they are enslaving 300,000 of my fellow North Korean women in China as sex slaves in the current 21st century, I thought the world would take action to stop this. So I shared that story in Dublin, Ireland, and that speech became viewed by almost 1 billion people. So that got to the publishers, and they were calling me to write my first book. So first book happened by almost an accident like that. And then second book was really active choice of me writing this book, was because, you know, after going through all of that, I came to this promised land, and I went to Columbia University in New York City. I did my BA there, and then I have my son here. And then I could not believe what I was seeing, living through the pandemic, living through the BLM protests in that summer. The tactics that the same tendency that I was seeing in North Korea was crippling up in America. And people don't recognize the threats that is coming for our liberty in America. So is writing actually standing up against North Korean dictatorship was like less scary than writing second book to standing up against the PC culture, actually.
I mean, I think to some that it would sound a little bit like hyperbole or exaggeration because of the fact that, you're in a dictatorship where it's life or death. And here in America, I mean, during the pandemic, right, they would probably just say, these are protests. This is part of American culture. We're living through at the time they would say unprecedented pandemic. So I think people would be surprised to hear that that's your perspective. Yeah,
I think that's where a lot of people don't even want to know what I'm talking about, the same tendencies that is happening, because they somehow assume that North Korea became that way just one day. We just woke up and it's not current North Korea. It took a journey to get there. And during that journey, a lot of things happened, and a lot of things people did not fight back. Now I come to America. At school, I was really appalled by my classmates in their like juice detox. Their problems of having too much food. They're going to gym classes, paying their money to burn off their calories. And most privileged generation of our world right now is being in America. And they're telling me they're so oppressed. The American system is so evil. And I was asking them, what about America that you hate so much that you want to destroy this country? And these are like Columbia Ivy League educated kids. And they were telling me, you know what, this system is so horrible. The capitalism is so greedy that we have homeless people and we have inequality. They are billionaires. And that was a sign of the evilness of capitalism. And as a North Korean, to me, is like, you have a right not to work. In North Korea, if you choose not to work, you're sent to political prison camp. You don't have a right not to work in communist dictatorship. You have to work for free as a slave labor. And so the fact that people in this country become homeless and choose to do nothing about it, that's a sign of freedom to me as a North Korean. Second is that there's people become like Elon Musk, become billionaires. That in North Korea, we are, of course, all equal, but we are dying from starvation. We are so poor.
And in North Korea, I mean, I think it's fair to say all equal except for the ruling class. I mean, Kim Jong-un and his family are, I would say, probably billionaires, right? So
I mean, he's God, and remaining, all of us don't even know what human rights is, right? And I come to America, people know what human rights is. And the fact that their individuals can innovate and start a company and become a billionaire means there is a mobility. That's a sign of progress. That is not a sign of oppression. But this ideology where inequality is evil, like they forget that poverty is evil. Poverty is wrong, and that's a very dangerous thing. But inequality is something that we should almost celebrate. It's not something that we should fight against, right? And then this idea of equity is the exact same North Korean thing, that we need to let's make the equality of outcomes for everybody. And
Sure.
the regime promised that equality of outcomes, you're going to make sure that everybody is equal. So give us your private property, give us your freedom of speech, your rights. And then once you give us all of that, we are going to give you free healthcare, free education, free housing, free food, free of everything provided by the government.
And of course, I mean, the obvious is you also don't have the right to bear arms to fight back against the government.
Yeah, and exactly, it comes to that in America right now, that people want the free government's free tuition. They want free housing. They want the universal income. The governments need to take care of all of us. And that idea is so dangerous. That drove more than hundreds of millions of humanity into death. Nothing has been more dangerous than big government has been ever to individuals. And people don't understand, like in America right now. And this toxic ideology, this evil ideology of equity and collectivism were being taught in classrooms, were being taught everywhere in the country. I think that is the comparison I'm making. It's not that our quality of living currently in America is like North Korean people. But this ideology that are being taught in classrooms everywhere is resembling the ideology North Korea holds.
Well, speaking of firearms on the show, as you may have heard, Fort Scott Munitions, right? The best ammo out there. Fort Scott is a manufacturer of multi-federal patented solid copper and brass CNC spun ammunition. It's designed to tumble upon impact, TUI, and soft tissue, leaving devastating wound channels for faster bleed out and quicker incapacitation. This ammunition was originally developed to innovate and improve on the standard of military-grade ammunition design. It was found that not only did the TUI ammunition outperform competitors in the self-defense industry, but it quickly became apparent that it would be a top contender for hunters alike. With the ammo being CNC spun, the tolerances are some of the tightest on the market, ensuring that you receive the same results with each pull of the trigger. Fort Scott is available throughout privately owned businesses in all 50 states, but you can go to the website and get a great discount through us when you go to fsm.com and you use the promo code BATTLELINE for 15% off your order. Only available to listeners of the Battleline podcast. Fort Scott Munitions is a proud supporter of Chris Peranto, Battleline Tactical, and the Battleline podcast. If you haven't yet made the switch to Fort Scott Munitions, do it today. FSM.com. Promo code BATTLELINE. This is the best ammo on the market. This show is also sponsored by our great friends at Photonis Defense. We love them. This is the most high-end night vision on the market. Check it out. You are not going to find this stuff in your stores like Cabela's and that type of thing. This is really for serious professionals, but also just for serious hunters, shooters who want to use the best night vision out there. Now you can have the superpower to see in the dark with the Viper Binocular Night Vision System by Photonis Defense. It's the global leader in night vision solutions, providing more high-quality night vision capabilities than anyone. Military, law enforcement, and public safety end users utilize Photonis Defense solutions to give them the edge at night in tactical situations and rescue operations. We got Border Patrol using them now. This stuff is awesome. Operators of all branches, people like Justin Sheehan, Navy SEAL, and of course Army Rangers like Chris Peranto, who will be back on the podcast soon. I know it's been a long wait for him, but hopefully you've enjoyed these shows. The new Viper Binocular carries the same features and benefits as the Photonis Defense Viper Monocular, with a ruggedized body and harnesses the power of the Echo Intensifier tubes, giving you sharper images, reduced halo, and industry-leading ultra-fast auto-gating across the range of dynamic operating conditions. Become masters of darkness today. Visit PhotonisDefense.com for more information, or look for Photonis Defense product options from your night vision dealer. That's Photonis Defense, Photonis Defense.com. Now back to our interview with Yeonmi Park. No, I agree with what you're saying. And I think part of the problem is so many people in America are struggling, not anywhere near to the struggle that you went through in North Korea. But I think so many of the reasons for the struggling is because of actual government interference in things, whether it's printing the amount of money that we have, whether it's the amount of money during pandemic assistance, as you were talking about during the pandemic, or the amount of money being sent to Ukraine. I mean, that money is not being sent to rescue women like yourself in North Korea. And I think people don't ask the bigger questions of why. Like, why is that our priority right now when there are so many dictatorships around the world? Russia is not the only dictatorship that is doing what they're doing, but it's almost like we have this myopic focus on one thing, and that's all that we can be concerned about. And I think people are not very informed on North Korea because it's not covered by the mainstream media very much.
Yeah, because they don't cover North Korea because of Chinese piece. That they know that China is responsible for the North Korean human rights crisis. They are sponsoring this dictatorship. They are buying these girls and selling them and killing and taking their organs out of them. So if the mainstream media cannot talk about it, remember, based on my first book, they were trying to make a movie about my first book. And the Hollywood producer sent me a script. And in the script says, China was my promised land. When I got to China, I got the protection, they heard me and they rescued me. And I called the producer, I go, what are you talking about? This is not what happened. And he said, this is the only way we can make about North Korean movie in the current Hollywood. So this hijacking of institutions in America right now, the mainstream media, Hollywood, education, all of it now under Chinese control, because these people have interest of getting Chinese money and distribution rights. So like you said, I think a lot of people don't understand how much our country is now going through struggle through the lies that is put up by the media, government officials, and controlling our speech. And, you know, it's of course not as bad as North Korea, but if we do not stop here, we are going to continue to become that way.
Yeah, and when it comes to the propaganda out of China as well, I think very few know about the struggle right now. And we covered on the podcast with the Uyghur Muslims and them being sent on trains to essentially concentration camps. And America, I think because of how close we are to China, has not really involved themselves in that major human rights violation going on.
Yeah, that's my problem. Like I was writing in my new book, While Time Remains, I was talking about, I was meeting Jeff Bezos. You know, I went to the Met Gala, and all the movers and shakers and the leaders of this, you know, political correctness, this culture. I mean, they denounce slavery that happened in America a long time ago. They say slavery is evil and wrong. Like I completely agree. And there are modern day slaves that sponsored by the communist parties in China. And they don't want to do anything about that. They want to talk about Black Lives Matter, but they don't want to talk about these Uyghurs, you know, in Xinjiang, and their organs are harvested out of them. They get raped, they get sent to prison camps, and they don't talk about that. So the hypocrisy of American elite, that is so dangerous. And they are the ones also leading this culture of political correctness, where you if you have a wrong speech, that's a hate speech. Therefore, you deserve to be silenced. You need to be deplatformed and canceled.
Exactly. And the way that they're doing it, I mean, we experience it a lot with the podcast, is they're not going to throw you in jail because you say the wrong thing, but they're going to decrease your speech online, which is where we distribute things. It's basically the town square now, is that if you have a podcast, you're on YouTube, we're going to shut down your reach. We're only going to have the reach of what we want out there. And it's definitely very concerning, because the people who will disagree with me and you on this will say, well, these are private companies doing what they want to do, but they're no longer private companies when they're working with government. It's becoming, it's a style of fascism at that point.
Yeah, I mean, like I was in the YouTube too. I was making all these videos about how women in China get raped and how they were being, or like during the pandemic in China, in their Baidu, like Chinese Google, they could just order North Korean girls to their door, like Uber Eats delivering your food for like few $100 to get raped and be your sex toy.
Wow.
And this was allowed during the 21st century. And I was talking about this, and my videos get demonetized and censored, and of course get shadow banned everywhere. And I reached out to Google. I was like, they were saying how we need to believe women, right? The Me Too, the women's sexual harassment matters in America. And like, this is what happened to other women. Why do you guys not support this? And it's like, it does not meet our guidelines, whatever the guideline means. So,
yeah, it's very vague.
Yeah, it's very vague guideline. And I think because of, I mean, of course, like you said, right, in North Korea, you're going to get executed if you say the wrong things. But in America currently, still there's a price you need to pay to think for yourself, to speak your mind and standing up against the mainstream ideology. So if we keep putting up with this, and eventually nobody knows, are you going to go back to before or going forward to the North Korean path or Chinese path? I think it's really up to us currently which path we are going to choose.
Absolutely. I mean, you could answer this, but I would venture to guess that I'm sure many people who have read your book have said, I agree with the fight that you're in. I agree with everything that you're saying, but I can't say it because I work for a company. And if I'm vocal about it, they might get rid of me.
Of course, I think that it's the culture of this American corporation, right? That you need to talk about the diversity of skin color. That's the most, the equity. Even Kamala Harris, our vice president, talking about the equity all day long. That evil ideology. I mean, AOC, everybody talks about that. And but that is where it comes down to, people don't understand. You know, in communism, capitalists get executed. In capitalism, socialists thrives. Bernie Sanders, AOC, all these people that thrive, right? So eventually, I think we need to really make them believe that capitalism is good system. That this ideology of capitalism got so demonized. People think that world capitalism is dirty. They don't defend the country anymore because they are brainwashed to think that America is a really inherently evil and capital is an inherently greedy system. And I think that first thing comes from education.
Yeah, and what I was going to say too, with the problem of equity, we're a very military centric podcast. I'd say about half of our audience is former military or active duty, and then the other half are civilians like you and myself. But the problem in the military, a lot of people are seeing, is the lowering in standards of recruits. It's, and it's because we have to have more women in the military. We have to have more of this group in the military. And it's no longer, many people feel, the strongest military out there, because when you start lowering standards, especially for special operations military, that's going to be a problem.
Yeah, even education for the medicine, for doctors, they do that. The people
we're hearing about it with pilots. We're hearing pilots.
Yeah.
Standards for
I mean, the United, right? Like the people who are actually dealing with the human life. I mean, it's, for instance, okay, some like lecturer at some museum is fine, whoever you want to hire. But when it comes to really life and death decision, they push the meritocracy and competency away and becomes like a North Korean system where nothing works right now. Why country is so poor? Because they don't care how competent you are. Like when somebody told me in South Korea for the first time that in South Korea, if you work hard, you are going to get rewarded for it. And to me, that was justice. Like, I did not know what justice meant, but that sounded like justice. In North Korea, no matter how hard you want to go out there, work and carry the bricks and work hard, if you were not born in the right that class, and because of even North Korea is a complete equal socialist paradise, the regime divided us into 51 different classes. You don't go get to like university, you don't get the job that you want. And in America now, currently, it's like that. Like my son, who's half white and half Asian, he's so screwed. He's on average, he's like on SAT, I think they take like 140 points out of his score. Like he is actively discriminated for being white and Asian.
Yeah. And
So
I even saw recently, and this is an actual, I mean, I could probably look it up as I'm talking to you, but it's been in the news that the IRS, in terms of auditing, they're going to target whites and Asians in particular for auditing. And there's no reason to do that. It used to be completely random. And I'm going to find it, just in case people think I'm making this up. I'll find the source on it. But I'm sure you heard about that.
No, I mean, I'm not surprised. I didn't hear about it, but I'm not surprised at all because what they're doing already.
Yeah, I'm looking at it. So this is Fox News right here. IRS accused of using racial equity for audits targeting white Asian taxpayers. And it says here, so it's basically the America First Legal Foundation has uncovered this. And yeah, I could get into the whole story here, but what they are alleging is that the government is going to target certain racial groups in terms of who they're going to audit.
Of course.
Yeah.
It's a most demonized class right now in America. Like,
yeah, so keep going. I'm sorry.
No, I mean, like, that's the thing. Like, you get punished for something that you did not choose, like skin color. Like, the greatest injustice is for people being punished for the things they didn't do. Like in North Korea, if one person commits a crime, the 3 to 8 generations get punished for that. It's something called collective guilt, collective punishment. It's not about you as an individual, it's all about collectivism, right?
Sure.
And so now in America, we are being collectively punishing white people because supposedly their ancestors owned some slaves. And therefore, you are privileged and you're guilty.
Yeah,
That's
which is crazy because it's like, if you saw me, I guess I am a white person, but no one in my family lived in the country when that happened. I mean, half of my family are the descendants of Holocaust survivors. So yeah, it is crazy to look at someone and say, because of your skin tone, because of your racial background, you're guilty for something that even you may not have any lineage, any connection to at all. You know what I wanted to ask you about, because you would offer way more insight into this than I think any guest we've ever had on, and everyone had an opinion on it. The policy of the U.S. in North Korea prior to Donald Trump was basically that we were not going to have any relations with them at all. No American president ever set foot in North Korea or met with Kim Jong-un. It was kind of that George W. Bush line of, we don't negotiate with terrorists, and that was our hard line. Donald Trump was the first president, as our audience knows, to go over to North Korea to meet with Kim Jong-un. He did make statements that I think I think you would find kind of crazy, where he said, I fell in love with Kim Jong-un. They seem to have a good relationship on some level. At the same time, there were people saying like, oh, this is going to lead to World War III, and none of that happened, of course. But how did you feel about when Donald Trump went to North Korea and met with the leader there?
Yeah, I was actively speaking out against that at the time. And I mean, that was the apparently only time New York Times wanted me put on their front page, because I was criticizing Trump, right?
Exactly, yeah.
Every newspaper wanted me at the time. No.
That's funny.
My logic a little bit changed, but still the main core stays the same. I do think that Trump had good intentions. And he's outside of Washington, D.C. He's not a career politician. And I do think that he somehow thought, like, dealing with thugs in the bad part of the city, you build a trust and then you're going to build up a hotel there. Some kind of that logic he had from business background. I think he completely underestimated that Kim Jong-un is a 3 generation of a dictatorship that has been in power in 80 years. Like, they know what they're doing. They are very logical. And they understand that they have time and Trump doesn't. as long as they buy a time with Trump and then promise they might be neutralized eventually, then Trump gonna get out of the office, and then the new leader comes in, they need to renegotiate everything, and that takes forever, right? So North Korea can play this game as long as like they can. And I think Trump didn't understand that by meeting him and sitting down with him and of course complimenting him, like, you know, he's a great guy, he loves his people, his people loves him, everybody like claps and take the notes when he speaks, right? Like and
They have to, yeah.
it's, I mean, we get executed otherwise.
Yeah.
And I think that was a bit of too much. He didn't have to play that hard to Kim Jong-un to trust him, because Kim Jong-un will never inherently trust him. He might show that on the surface, but inherently North Korea is never gonna trust America, like America in any way.
Yeah, and I even remember some of the pictures that were criticized of Trump saluting not Kim Jong-un, but members of the military.
Yeah. I think that was giving legitimacy to Kim Jong-un for nothing. But the good thing that he did was that he was a strong leader. Initially, when Kim Jong-un was testing all those like long-range missiles, like Trump was like, my nuclear button is bigger than yours, Kim Jong-un.
Yeah.
Like, listen to me, right? You do not like harass us. And North Korea was not there to test long-range missiles ever. During that 4 years, they were not there. Now with Biden, they went back to Obama time where they called the strategic patience. It's like, which means you do not think strategically. You don't do anything with North Korea. But now North Korea tests missiles like every day. And that long-range missiles reaching America eventually. That will come destroy this country. That's the goal of that missile. So there's a pros and cons. Like there's a lot of less threat from North Korea under Trump. But with Biden, there's so much actual legitimate threat is coming, and America does not know what to do with that.
What do you think should be done with North Korea for whoever's in charge, whether it's Biden the next couple of years or whoever's the president for the next 4 years following that? What would your policy be?
China has all the keys. Without China, North Korea cannot survive in one week. Kim Jong-un cannot run his country without China in 1 day. Everything comes from China. North Korea does not have oil. And how Kim Jong-un gonna test the nukes without oil? But he cannot drive those tanks and cars in any way. Even during the pandemic, China was smuggling all that oil to North Korea during the time. So destroying North Korea is not that easy. Just cut the oil supply and they will collapse on their own. But China refused to do that. So I think whoever comes in next, they do recognize that it's modern day Holocaust. It's not what I'm saying. The UN investigated for the 3 years, and in their COI report in 2014, the only resemblance that we find in human history is a Holocaust and Stalin's work camps. So Holocaust is repeating in North Korea again, and we are denying it. And I think that's the next goal, is if we truly care about the safety of America, which is the actual legit threat coming from nuclear threat from North Korea, that has stopped. And also the human rights crisis. But I know that most of people asking me, I'm a human rights activist, they keep asking me, nobody has any problem. The people fighting for dolphins and little ducks, right? And chicken ranges, and they already applaud, like, you are doing such a good work. And for human rights, to me, they always come ask, why do I have to care about human rights? I'm like, we are the only ones can fight for human rights. Do you think dogs are not fight for our rights? Like the machines are not gonna fight for our rights. We are the only ones can fight for human rights.
Sure.
And like that, somehow the human rights is really listing on their priority list. And then human rights doesn't get them act, then it's got to be American security. North Korea has a legit capability reaching American mainland and bombing us. And their goal is doing that. And that's why they keep testing their nukes. So if that doesn't scare us, I don't know what should.
What would you say, though, to people who would feel we need China in order to survive? We need to have a strong partnership with China. They consume so much of our movies out of Hollywood, our entertainment, and then we consume so many of their products. I'm sure some of this equipment on my desk is made in China. I would, be willing to say, and our iPhones, none of this it's made in Asia. None of it is made here in the USA. I think a lot of people in power would say it's unrealistic for us not to have a partnership with China. What would you say to them?
The thing is, why people are America lost that strength is and the moral compass. That makes us very weak, is that we are the ones who having hold all the kids. China needs our investment. China needs our manufacturers go there and start making stuff, because we hire them, we sell products, we pay them, right? China is a huge problem if the American companies don't come and start producing stuff. So if China makes more money out of us, then we are making money out of them. Right, the surplus of like the trading is so big difference. China teaches so much, so they need us. It's not our position to go beg them to have a trade with us. They need to come beg us. So for us to condition of, instead of going to Philippines or Thailand or South Korea or India, the countries that are democracy, but we can say that if you guys do not stop supporting Kim Jong-un and stop taking our universities and feeding them all this leftist ideology, if you do not mess with us, we can still have those relationship that is mutually respectful, you know?
Yeah.
But somehow Americans are begging right now because these companies just want to.
Yeah, no, and I was just going to say, it must anger you so much when you hear about these prominent American businessmen who move to China and build their industries in China. I mean, when you hear of someone like Eric Prince doing all this work in China, the founder of Blackwater, a guy who created this massive company in America, and then he moves there and helps build their infrastructure. I mean, it is in some sense treasonous to go over there and do that.
Yeah, I think to me is, I mean, I'm a libertarian at some point. So it's okay. If you want to be a bad person, that's fine. But as a government, when your interest is representing your own nation's interest, they are fighting for us. That we hired our politicians to fight for our own interests, our own nation's interest, our border interest. So when the government does that, I think that's where real problem begins, right? If there are some bad, horrible people gonna go run to other countries, that's fine. I mean, of course, as a society, we should keep criticizing them. But with the governments like current America, where they're completely, like they don't show the authority of America, that our power to them. And as if somehow China is our like equal trading partner. They are not. They are big cheaters, that they're lying about everything. And somehow pretending that, they are not getting any benefits from us. So I think that's why I was very supportive of Trump, how he was so tough on China. And he understood that China was cheating on us. And we had every power to change it. And it was up to us to change that. So hopefully whoever comes next to our office, they can fighting for American interests for the first time, or finally.
Absolutely. And then even during the whole COVID-19 pandemic, we saw so many politicians who were even afraid to say this came from China. This came from the Wuhan lab. I remember the governor here at the time, Governor Cuomo, was calling it a European virus. And that's totally like the censorship of language to have a different reality, a different spin on what's actually going on in the world.
Right. I mean, you're also in the YouTuber, right? Like we all had that phase where we could not say that word. You'd get demonetized and censored, and you were being called a racist. So it's like, how is this a free country? And I think living in New York City does not feel like a free country at all. This country is getting destroyed. Living in Chicago and New York, somehow you think that progress is a natural course of humanity. As the time goes by, we learn more stuff, innovate more stuff, and things getting better. No, under communism, things get worse. Sure. And it's like that. And it's the left, under Lori life, like in Chicago, we are getting destroyed. Literally. I mean, New York City, the same thing. So I think that's like where Americans are taking progress for granted. They are taking for their liberty for granted. And if we stop fighting for those values, and you're going to lose it.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. And one thing I did want to ask you about, and this is a tougher question, but I know that when you put out the first book, there was some controversy. And part of it is the fact that no one, as we said earlier, comes out of North Korea, speaks out. It's a complete blackout on what goes on in North Korea. So I think because of that, logically, people in America are cynical when a book like yours comes out. We've seen so many books come out where people have changed information and it wasn't completely factual. So I'm just wondering, how do you address critics who say, I don't know if this, we can't verify that all of the information in Yeonmi's Park is 100% accurate, and it's your story.
Yeah. So I think that's where I think that's a good journalist always verify. I really believe that journalism became such a joke right now in America. Nobody verifies anything. So maybe at the time when I was started speaking out, at least journalists were doing their job. But you wouldn't actually believe how many people love North Korea because they hate capitalism America. The North Korea is still officially the only country that is holding a socialist flag on their nation. So a lot of that was also the Leninist, Marxist, Maoist, communist, democratic, socialist, all of those people hate me for that reason. Even back then, because I was criticizing North Korean regime. But few questions was really legit. Like when I was saying I ate grass, I did not eat grass, I ate plants. And I was learning English as an adult at 21. When you type Korean words in Korean dictionary, they give you grass first. So I did not know the nuance between plants and grass difference. And then when I crossed those big mountain hills, crossed that frozen river, they went to Google Earth and checked the altitude of that hill. And basically, certain degree, it's not a mountain. It's a high hill. I still don't know the difference of altitude, but basically they thought that was not a mountain, it was a hill. So, okay, that I don't understand. But the other ones they actually questioning was a real one, that I had to hide the fact that I was trafficked in China. As I said, I was really judged heavily by the missionaries in South Korea, from South Korea and China. And then I went to South Korea as a 15 years old young girl. And I still wanted to be a mother and getting married someday and have a normal family. But in South Korea, they still blame the rape victims. They don't blame the perpetrator. They are very conservative countries there. So, I mean, as you can see, I became a mother at 22 in America. That was my dream. And I thought there's no way no sane man gonna marry a child who was raped several years in their life and as a sex slave, and no same mother-in-law gonna welcome me in their family. So when I came to America, I was realizing the world can be this tolerant. The world can be this much less judgmental. So, but the thing is, that was right before the book. Once the book came out, that's when Penguin is not stupid. They're not gonna do that. I had a co-author with me who wrote a book with Hillary Clinton and other people. It's interesting. And she came with me. She had a voice recording of all the people that I grew up with in North Korea, who I crossed the desert together. So she got the voice recording of them all and gave it to Penguin legal team. Because some of them also misremember later what I said. So it's very important for us to get that voice recording and getting saved. So the book was not written by my memory. It was written by the people that I escaped together, and in memory of my mother, my sister. Three of us did not remember the event the same way. We did not print the book because we could all have different versions. So only the things.
And you were very young. You were very young.
Yeah, I was 13, escaping, right? So only things that we put in the book was all three of us memorized the same way. That was all in the recording too. We would put in the book. And the people we escaped together, if that's their version, we put their version in the book because they have less biases than us. And then that's why I was ready to sue anybody who was slander. Sure. But after the book comes out, nobody would question anything. But there was one article that came out right before the book. And then I wanted to defend myself, but the Penguin was when they go low, you go high. You don't be going down there and saying you did not know the difference between grass and plants, just let it go.
Yeah.
But now it's if I were back then, I could have this platform, having a YouTube channel, or spoke better English, I would have defended myself. But back then I really couldn't.
Yeah, and these are such small discrepancies for such a major book with so many more important details in it, and the overwhelming, a message of the book, of both books, is what's important to people. So yeah, are there any last words that you have in terms of what you want people to get out of this new book, for people who are thinking of picking it up? Once again, it's While Time Remains, a North Korean defector's search for freedom in America. I mean, if people love the first book, or they didn't start with the first book, what's the main thing that you want people to learn from this?
I think the main message is really that I think I'm witnessing our moment of cultural revolution in America. This is a silent revolution. Not all revolutions are, loud and destroying stuff.
Sure.
A lot of revolutions begins this way. And maybe the last moment we see all the chaos. And I think that revolution began in our education, in our even diversity training, in our government bodies. I was actually canceled by FBI last year. I was invited to give a speech in FBI Dallas and talk about the plight of North Korean women. And then 2 days before, FBI head of diversity officer calls me. I don't even know why does the FBI need a head of diversity in their department, but they do. Tells me that because of my political opinions, they cannot invite me to give a speech. And we purely agreed that speech was gonna be only the North Korean people's part and how they're surviving China. It was nothing to American politics. And then that's when I realizing none of these people are understanding what it means to be American, because I just became American last year. And during my citizenship interview, the officer was asking me, have you ever persecuted anybody for their political opinions? If I said yes, I could not become American. Being American means you cannot persecute anybody for their political opinions. And these people completely lost. They don't know what it means to be American. They don't know what it means to believe in this Constitution. So I really hope that people finally recognize the threats that is happening in our country. The darkness is arriving, and it is up to us to redefine our nation, or I think going this path of China and North Korean path. So it's a very critical moment of our history, and it's freedom is not guaranteed and it's not free. There's always price of freedom, and I hope that more people choose to pay that price right now than later, when it comes like North Korea and China, where your generations of people get executed along with you. At least right now, we don't have that price pay right now. It's all you pay is maybe your job.
Yeah, that's true. And when we saw the protests going on in Hong Kong, I think a lot of our listeners probably felt like these people understand what it means to be American and the ideals of America more than people who have been here their whole lives. We did see those protesters in Hong Kong flying the American flag and singing American songs. I mean, that was amazing to see, because at least some of them do have a little bit, from what we've seen, of access to the internet, unlike North Korea, and they do have some idea of what's out there in the outside world. It's not a complete media blackout, and I think that's what's going to change things. But once again, the book is While Time Remains, a North Korean defector's search for freedom in America, which is out now through Simon & Schuster. At Yeonmi Park on Instagram, at Yeonmi_Park, which is YEONMI_Park, and then at Yeonmi Park NK on Twitter. The one thing that I mentioned really early in the interview was your work with Link as well, Liberty in North Korea, which is a nonprofit organization focused on rescuing North Korean refugees hiding in China, resettling them in South Korea and the US, so that hopefully we can increase that number of people like yourself who have come over here. But this has been an honor speaking with you. I mean, I've been following you since the first book and the interview that you did with Joe Rogan, like so many people. And I think what you're doing takes a lot of courage to get out there and tell your story.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm very honored.
That's all for this episode of the Battle Line Podcast. But we'll be back on Monday with more American Straight Talk. Until then, be sure to follow us on Instagram at Battle Line Podcast and on Twitter at Battle Line Pod. To sign up for future Battle Line tactical courses, go to www.christantoparanto.net. Believe in yourself, face all challenges head on, and as always, never quit.